So we are talking about how to be a high performing business analyst. And I am so excited about that. What does that mean to you? And I will just let you know in on a little bit of a secret. This title, How to Be a High Performing Business Analyst, it's also the working title of my next book. So I guess you could say I'm trying it out here on this LinkedIn Live. We've had almost record attendance or record RSVPs. We'll see what attendance is like. I hope you're all joining us. So far it's sounding like at least a good title, a good topic. But what does this mean to you? Like, what is being a high performing business analyst? What does that mean to you? Right? Or did you come here to find out? Like, Laura, that's why I'm here. Why don't you tell us? Right? I'm curious if you have any preconceptions or very specific ideas about that, though. Because as I started thinking about my next book, and with all the great books already in the business analysis profession, including the book that I've already written, How to Start a Business Analyst Career, I've been really going deep on the challenges that even after, the IIBA being in place for 20 years and all the great things that have happened in our profession, what are the challenges that we still face? And what are the essential skill sets that we need to survive and thrive in our current and near future times? And I think our environment is ripe for a shift in thinking. So for too long, we have been waiting for others to sanction our role, right? To give us the title, to put a BA practice in place, to give us really permission to bring better practices. And we've been doing this thing as a profession that I like to think of as a bit of shape shifting. And what I mean by that is that we literally shape shift or adjust our role to fit in with the other roles and personalities that are on the team. So has anyone ever felt that way? You can just type me in the comments. I'm just looking over all these wonderful people from all across the world. So excited to see you all. Thank you for being here. All right, but has anyone ever felt like they're kind of shape shifting, right? Trying to figure it out or trying to fit in with the other personalities on the team? And I will be totally honest, I have often advised people to do this. And I still do. It's great advice. When you are new to a role or new to a company, a certain amount of shape shifting and fitting in helps you demonstrate your value and build your reputation. It solidifies your role and your impact, right? So it's really, really a great credibility tool, but it also creates some challenges. So let me know in the comments if any of these sound familiar as well. So lots of me's for like, oh yes, I've been a shapeshifter, right? So, but here's what happens when we do this almost like too much, right? Is that there can be a lack of clarity about your role and expectations change from one project or one employer to the next. And it can be difficult to know if you really have the foundations you need to be successful or if you are doing quote unquote true business analysis work. Right? Often when you're doing a lot of shape shifting, you deal then with unclear management expectations. Your management really doesn't know how to best leverage you or your skill set effectively because you're always kind of fitting in with the rest of the team. And you personally might feel stuck in one position career-wise. Sorry, right as I was getting started, this fly found its way into my office. So if you see me doing that, that's why. But you might feel stuck in one position, right? Where you're not really sure how your skills and experience translate within the industry because you've kind of shifted yourself into this role that feels very specific and unique to the company that you're in. And then to top things off, you might learn what you should or could be doing, right? You take a course or go on LinkedIn and find a blog or watch a YouTube video. And then you're like so excited to bring it back to your team. And then all you face is this overwhelming resistance, like to actually performing the role that you feel like you could be doing, even though you know you would make a huge difference to your organization if you did that. So Demir, shape shifting is just fitting in. It's like expanding and contracting your role based on the other roles that are in place within your team. So it's using that reactive mode. Okay, so those challenges kind of see a lot of familiar, some support in the chat that those are challenges that people face. right? And so what's different about a high performing business analyst? That type of individual, that type of professional recognizes all of these challenges, right? They see them for what they are, challenges, not set in stone realities. They see them as problems to be solved and opportunities to shape their role. But opportunities to actually shape their role to their best personal advantage and in a way that's going to get the best possible results on their projects and for their employer. So they might still shapeshift, right? It's a very great skill set to have, but they do it with some intention and a lot of purpose. They're very conscious about their shapeshifting, and they are fully aware of how they are shifting their role. And they also feel empowered to say no and set boundaries when necessary to give themselves space to do their best work. They take charge of their career. They bring best practices to their organization in a way that makes a tangible difference for their projects, right? So not just pie in the sky best practices. If you're on my email list, you got a message about this. I think it was last week about, how I used to think best practices were something you did in a perfect, ideal world that didn't ever exist in any organization I ever worked in. And so I never felt like I really had best practices because we were always figuring out how to get things done in the most efficient way possible. Well, it turns out, quick reframe, actually being able to get things done in the most effective way possible and with the least amount of risk possible, or balancing those, is actually a great best practice, right? So that's how we want to start thinking about best practices. And so a high performing business analyst would bring that kind of business best practice to their team and intentionally build up their skills so they're prepared to take on a variety of roles. They know what to do when and why, to use certain tools and techniques, and have a step-by-step understanding of how to shape a project. I would love to hear, and there's a bit of a delay, so I'll let you get this into the comments, but what is coming up for you around this? Right? Because these problems, they're really real. And I want to just say that none of this is your fault, right? We are in an organizational environment that is increasingly fast-paced, where change is unfolding faster than ever before. Expectations for everyone, not just for BAs, but everyone, right, are rising. And there is this uncertainty level at every level of the organization. The reality is that most people you work with, they're probably just doing their best, and they're also figuring things out as they go along. So if they don't happen to know when you bring a new technique, like what it is and see how excited it is, they're probably overwhelmed too. And they just don't know to know how amazing this is going to be for them until they experience it with you. There's no proverbial expert in the future. It doesn't exist yet. And we're all building it together. So I want to say that in business analysts, like, we are dropped in often into what feels almost like chaos. It might be, depending on your organization, slightly organized chaos. It might just feel a little messy, but our role is to bring order to that, right? To sift through the opportunities, to create positive change, to create alignment out of disagreement, to create clarity out of ambiguity. So that's why we're there. But that chaos, that disagreement, that ambiguity, it existed before you. It existed before us. It was there. No matter what we do, like, we're walking into a bit of a mess. That's actually why our roles exist, right? We can't control the mess. We didn't create the mess, but we can clean it up. And as I was kind of preparing for this part, I kept having this visual, and I will totally date myself here. I grew up in the 80s. Right? So watching a lot of MTV like videos after school, or maybe this is more the 90s, like when I was a little bit older, and that was probably more appropriate. But there was this Billy Joel video, like the "We Didn't Start the Fire" video, right? And I kept having this moment of seeing him like push the desk, right? When he's like, there's all the things and the chaos in the world, and we didn't start the fire. We did not create this mess, right? We did not create it, but we can clear it up. We can organize it. We can get people together and foster collaboration. And that's what a high performing business analyst does. So does that sound exciting to you? I hope so. All right, so we are going to be talking about this today, and I'm going to give you some really deep toolbox ideas. I want this to be really interactive. I love that there's already so much interaction in the chat. But who here might be new to me? And if you are new to me and Bridging the Gap, could you also just type new in the comments. And if you've been hanging out for a while, let me know that too. Let me know that you've been here with me for a while. Sometimes people remember like the year they joined our email list, and we've had an email list for 15 years, and there are people who've been on our list for 15 years. And so we've been virtually hanging out for that time. But if you are new, I just want to share a little bit about how I got where I am today, because I think it's going to bring a lot of context to what we're going to cover. So lots of new people in the chat. Keith said he was just thinking about that when you said we didn't create the mess, because we didn't start the fire. Okay, so I started my career. I have I got my college degree, bachelor's degree in philosophy and English from a liberal arts school. I had really very few career opportunities right out of college. And I started in an editorial position. And I was bored out of my mind. It was a publishing company. It seemed on paper like it was going to be the best position for somebody with my background. It was really glorified administration, data entry type of work. And I was just so bored. And after about a year and a half, I got involved in testing that created an opportunity for me to move to the quality assurance team. And it was like all the sparks went off. Right? There was so much opportunity. I got to work on all these different projects, meet all kinds of people across the organization. I was this kind of gap filler between the editorial department and the tech team. And I spoke both of those languages, and I was able to bring a lot of discipline to how we tested the content or the data. And I made a name for myself for essentially building this new role from scratch. And I was invited to apply to what was a systems analyst role. And I was like, I'm just having so much fun in QA. And this lady, I remember her, Mary, she said, she just looked me in the eye and like, Laura, this will be a lot more money and it's a great opportunity. I really think you should think about it. And like that moment really shifted everything, because I went back and I thought about what I'd seen the systems analysts do and realized that that was like getting ahead of a lot of the problems that I was trying to fix at the end of the project. And so I applied for the position. I interviewed for the position. I ended up getting the position. And once again, QA felt like this total unearthing of so much opportunity, and systems analysis, or really was business analysis, was where my passion was. And I had no idea that it existed at that time. This is over 20 years ago. And I was really, really happy where I was at, and built, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we did there towards the end, actually. But an opportunity popped up for me to move to Los Angeles and work for an entirely new company. I was not looking for it. And I took it. I was like living in Michigan and just sort of decided that living in California felt like a really cool thing to do. I was in my mid-20s. And so why not? And in that organization, maybe some of you have been through this where you think like, I really know my stuff, right? I've done some really complex projects, and I go in, everything was new stakeholders, new industry, new technology stack, right? Similar type of product. That was the only thing that I felt like I could kind of hang on besides my business analysis skills. And those got stronger than ever in that organization because I needed them. I needed to be able to discover and elicit and build relationships and communicate, right? And that lasted about a year and a half before that company somewhat imploded, so to speak, or at least the opportunities that I had there. And the management moved to a new company in Colorado, and I was very lucky to be brought along as well. And that's when my career shifted into management. I hired my first ever employee. I was not looking to become a manager. I was really happy doing the strategic business analysis work. We had acquired 5 portfolio companies, and we were looking to bring those together and build a consolidated technology stack for all 5 companies. So we were doing due diligence on what features they had, what their key processes were, what their tech stacks were like. And my first hire was a tester, and then we hired a project manager, and then we finally hired a business analyst. And over the 3 or 4 years I spent there, I ended up building a 15-person team of BAs, PMs, and QAs. As part of, it was like 50 to 100 people in the technology team that really, when I was there, was like, there was 3 of us that got it started. So it was really a lot of change, a lot of building, a lot of growth really, really quickly. And so much change that I actually, over the 4 years had 3 CIO CTOs, like 2 CIOs and a CTO. And the last one about broke me. The culture got really toxic and I just quit with no plan. And that's when I started Bridging the Gap, which was really, for me, just a blog at the time. I thought maybe I wanted to get back into business analysis and do a little bit of consulting. And the training we do today morphed out of the questions that people kept asking me. And at the time, most of the training was not helping people be successful on the job, right? It was not even certification driven, just it felt that pie in the sky, best practice driven, right? And then people would come to me and be like, well, how do I actually do this on this project where I'm trying to move faster than lightning, right? And that's something I had a lot of experience with. And so that's what we started to build. Today, 15 years later, Bridging the Gap is focused on providing practical, results-oriented business analysis training. And over the last several years, I pulled myself out of the instructor role. I was blessed with an amazing team of instructors and admin, and I was focused on other aspects of growing the business. And to be honest, I lost touch a bit of what was going on in the community, and I missed that personal connection with our participants. So my goal has always been to help professionals apply what they learn right away on the job and give them feedback and support that helps them be more successful with where they're at. And I'm really excited to be stepping back into the instructor role. I'm going to share a little bit more about our next evolution of the blueprint in a bit. But for now, what I really want you to take away from some of that sharing is that career paths wind. Right? Rarely do they go in straight lines. I was not intentional about my career. I sort of just followed the opportunities that happened and sometimes got like pushed forward into roles that I was uncomfortable with. But there are twists and turns. I've been through a lot of them. Every piece adds something to where you're going, and every piece takes you forward to where you want to go. So with that, I want to teach you a model that we use at Bridging the Gap. And just bear with me for a second as I figure out how to share my screen. Not figure out how to do it, but like make sure I'm doing it right on StreamYard. Okay, perfect. There we go. So I want to teach you this business analyst success path, because what's really key, especially in a profession like ours with so much ambiguity in the role, so much variety of opportunity, so many like directions, so much ways that the titles can get conflated and misused, and senior doesn't necessarily mean senior, right? Like all those sorts of things, is that you have a set of guideposts. And I also want to say that as we're going to talk about these stages, that a high performing business analyst exists at every level. So it's not like, oh, you get to champion and now you get to be high performing. Like at every stage, there is something that will make you a high performing business analyst. It's about your mindset and your willingness to use the best of your abilities in your current situation, not like getting to a certain level of experience. So just to go through this, explorer is somebody who's just checking this out. You might be in this role like, oh, I kind of wonder, I've heard something about business analysis. What's this career like, right? And starting to consume content like this just to figure out if it's what you want to do. Intentional is somebody who's made the choice and is pursuing a career in business analysis. So there's a big difference between going to a lot of webinars and kind of thinking that maybe you'll do it someday and starting to put your blinders on and say, this is the goal I'm going for. Official is that person who has their first opportunity to do business analysis work, whether or not you have the title. My first title was systems analyst, right? And then I was manager business analysis, and then I was director of enterprise solutions. All of those roles, I was business analyst. All right. And it's, again, whether or not you are using those so-called best practices. So I get a lot of people, well, I was a business analyst, but, I didn't really do the thing the way that I saw somebody teach about how to do the thing. Right. Were you creating alignment out of ambiguity, or going from disagreement to alignment, creating clarity out of ambiguity? Right? Were you helping get clear about the requirements, helping get people on the same page about what the software and the process needs to do? You're a business analyst. All right, proven is when you have some consistent performance behind you, a broad skill set. So a lot of the tools and techniques we're going to talk about today are familiar to you, You know what techniques to use when. But often the fear of that proven person is that their skills aren't relevant beyond their current organization, right? Because you might have done some of that shape shifting we talked about in the beginning. And so you're like, gosh, I'm in this role that really is great for this organization, but how would it fit if I ever wanted to shift organizations? Or even how would I even grow it within my organization? You kind of get to this stuck point as a proven. And then superhero is everyone wants you. Everybody wants you on your project. And you feel really confident that you can be successful on any kind of project. And this happens. There's no easy way to get there. It happens by choosing to make the leaps. We're going to talk about getting uncomfortable, getting out of your silo. For me, it started to happen in that second business analyst role in a new company, right? And then I started to see, like did not even realize how much my expertise in non-BA areas, like understanding how the tech worked, knowing all the stakeholders, like how much that was helping me be successful in the business analyst role until I got into the new role. And I had none of that grounding me. And so I had to rely on my BA skills. Then it definitely happened when I moved to the role in Colorado and we had 5 companies with projects and they didn't quite get yet why they needed a business analyst, as they've been operating from some really informal processes. But as they started to work with me, they could see the value in the role and why we would do things that way. And then finally, you have chance. So the problem, though, the superhero phase is everyone wants them, right? Everyone wants them on their projects. And you can't be everything to everyone. And so the champion level is if you feel called to not just say no, but to also empower other people to be successful. This can look like being a lead, not necessarily even a manager, but a BA lead. It can look like informal mentoring of others on your team. Can look like training. It could look like sharing your expertise on LinkedIn, right? However you choose to help enable making others successful. So for me, in a way, it happened in my director level role when I started to build that BA team, because I had to set up some of those processes and kind of look at what successful BA work looked like. But it really happened when I started teaching the skills at Bridging the Gap. Okay, so the success path is all about breaking through career path plateaus, right? Which means you need to identify where you are at and where you're headed. So let us know in the comments, what stage would you say you're at today? And where would you ultimately like to be? It's not like everybody has to be a champion, right? That's not the deal. Some people really get comfortable in that proven or superhero role, which is great as well. Okay. Let's see. So question from Tevin. How are you able to handle the transition from ABA to leadership position? Yeah, that was really challenging. I think I could do a whole talk just on that. I will say the biggest thing was getting out of my own way. And I was grateful to be able to hire very, very experienced BAs, and which was helpful because I didn't know how to train them yet. I didn't have the time to figure out how to train them because we were in such this fast-paced environment, right? That we were able to hire experienced BAs, which brought its own challenges because everybody wanted to do things their own way. So I learned a lot about how do we, as a team, start to do things in a similar way so that people know what they're getting. All right. So lots of proven BA with imposter syndrome. Perfect, Keely. You are in exactly the right place. Switching from SME to BA, proven BA, and I need to be a hero to stay consistent, intentional BA champion. So all over the map, right? This is very normal, all over the map. So let's talk about how to get from here to there, right? So how to move up on your career level, or how to bring more of that high-performing BA mindset to your work. So a big mindset shift that needs to happen is to go from being reactive to proactive. Remember how we were talking about those shapeshifters, right? A bit in how you can it helps you get started in the short term, but it doesn't necessarily set you up for the long term, and how much of a mess we often walk into, whether we realize it or not. It's really easy to get reactive to the mess, react to the chaos, and just start solving problems, like one at a time, like looking at things like, okay, I got this request, I got to figure out what it means, and whack-a-mole, right? So this is like the whack-a-mole method. And this is that game in Michigan. It was always Chuck E. Cheese, where you literally have a thing and you're trying to whack the moles down, right? A high performing business analyst, they would like look under the hood of the game. Like, why are all these moles popping up? And like, do we actually need to be whacking them? What problem are they causing? Right? So like, maybe if I didn't whack them down, they would just like run away and not be a problem anymore. Maybe not. Maybe they're going and causing chaos. And so there's a reason we're doing this. Is there a better way? Is there something that's less stressful, more of a systemic underlying solution to this problem than just whacking, right? So in order to be in that mess that is going to exist, again, that's not our fault, it's just the way things are, and not be in reactive mode, we need a structured framework to support us in leading our teams through what to do when to drive decision making. And that's what the BA process framework that's up here is all about. Okay, so this is how you position yourself as being more valuable, as being the guide, that is having a framework of like, okay, great, I know that we're focused on this. You know what? I would like to understand who are all the stakeholders that need to be involved, or who requested this and why. This is part of getting oriented. Have we ever worked on this before? What kind of current state processes do we have in place? And then why are we doing this? What problem are we trying to solve? Right? What are the business objectives? And then leading your team to then from that why, what are we actually going to achieve in this project? Is it quite as simple as adding a field to that screen? Is there a reporting requirement? Or is this a big project where we're implementing an entirely new system? Right? Obviously, we can apply this on the littlest changes as well as the biggest changes. From there, what do I need to do as the business analyst to document, discover, analyze, gain clarity around what these requirements are? What processes do I need to understand? What software requirements do I need to, or use cases do I need to write? In an agile team, this could be your product backlog. The formulate a BA plan could be the product backlog that loosely organized into upcoming sprints, right? And from there, you start working through the details, discovering, analyzing, specifying, validating, getting clear on what those are, creating those deliverables that articulate what the business wants, and not just creating the output and like creating a lot of documentation and just like, oh, great, look at me, I created 100 pages of documentation, but actually making sure that documentation is being used as a tool to analyze and think through the problems, as well as get everyone on the same page about what the solution is going to be. And I'm going to show you a lot of those techniques in a minute. So if you have questions about that, we're getting to it. And then from there, how do you continue to collaborate with the technical implementation team, continue to collaborate with the business team to make sure they actually implement and receive and incorporate that solution into their day-to-day business? And then at the end, and actually all throughout, you want to be doing this, but certainly at the end, what value do we create, right? What solution, how did this solution add value to the organization? Where did we miss the mark? All right, and then you can just start the whole process over again. So Renee says, the problem is when I look under the hood for the moles, the others on the team are not happy and think that it's going backwards instead of moving forward. They don't want to feel like backtracking. Right, so you can look under the hood, right? And like that is the place where you get to decide. So does it make sense in this scenario to do that shape shifting and be like, okay, everybody's focused on this one mole and I'm gonna work with them and be a partner in this mole while kind of maybe doing a little bit more digging underneath, right? So you're kind of getting to a little bit more of the why, or is this a place where I need to take a stand and say, until we understand this whole box, it really doesn't make sense to move forward. Like there is no necessary right or wrong answer to that question, right? It can be contextual and situational, and there are going to be times when you just need to jump in and roll up your sleeves and kind of set some of the bigger picture issues aside. And then there will be times when you will have the power, or you'll have that stakeholder in the room who gets it who you can help advocate, or who will help advocate for some of these bigger picture things. And then you can involve them, and you can take those steps forward strategically. So by no means do you have to do it all the time, right? This is that intentional shape shifting. So when I was developing this process, the story, I had like a lot of challenges around it, because I had this like every project I've worked on is actually different, right? I've had a lot of project failures that, I haven't had all great projects. Like not everything has been roses. And so who am I to put together a process when I've had failed projects? Actually, my failed projects became the best material when I put this process in place, because I was diagnosing what made them fail. Why didn't they work? How would I have prevented that if I went back in time and redid that project today with the experience that I have today? Right. I also felt like my experience was limited by my experience, even though it was dozens of projects across 3 different companies and then variety of consulting contracts. Right. It was still my experience. But then it started to put it in place, put it out into the world, and other people started using it. So at this point, it's been used by thousands of business analysts, and you're welcome to use this as your starting point. The other area of resistance that people often face is that it feels like you're slowing things down, right? This is kind of similar to what Renee was adding to. But when you ask the right questions up front, you actually do help your team get things done more quickly in the long term and see all the missing pieces of the puzzle. So sometimes there's some education that needs to go into that, and there's also some invited trust, trust me on this one meeting where we're going to go through this piece, because my sense is that it's going to actually speed things up in the long term. Okay, so now that we've talked about the BA process, let's talk about the techniques you can use. So in step 5, I talked about, you just create all the deliverables, right? So what are those? What can those look like? All right. So these techniques can also help you bring more formality to your projects. So think about what we're going to go through here as a toolbox. You are not going to use every tool on every project, but when you have a diverse set of tools, you can be more effective in a wide variety of situations, right? It's about knowing what to use when. So let's start with the business level, the business process. This is almost always an important set of analysis. Early in my career, when I was a systems analyst, we were very, very focused on the software and data requirements and not so much the business level. But I think it actually led to some limited thinking about what was possible. And I sort of ended up sideways getting into it, and the reason is we were building an end user product. So really the product manager had the customer needs that then we turned into software requirements. But on the flip side, often, those customer or those software requirements would require new internal operation pieces to be in place. And then in those scenarios, we were starting to look at the business process. But if you are working on any sort of internal operation, for sure, you need to know, what is the process today? How does the business function? What are their goals? Does the workflow make sense? Does the technology support their workflow or actually make it harder? What outcome is really important? And we do that through process flow diagramming, which are also flow charts or workflow diagrams, and a textual business process model, and a lot of discovery. And then we move into the software requirements or the use cases and wireframes. So just to back up, we are going to talk about the software level as well as the data information level. And so we're going to talk about each of these, and I got a lot of examples. So the slides will move forward. If you see me looking over there, that's where my slides are, so I can have my notes up here. So the use cases and wireframes, this is a powerful combination that really brings a lot of clarity about what the software needs to do to support the business. And if you use use cases today, just put a UC in the comments. And if you use user stories today, I'd also love to hear that. Do you just skip use cases entirely and go right to your user stories? They capture, what I love about use cases is they capture a requirements in a way that is clear to the technical team so that they can build what the business actually wants. They're also typically very understandable by the business stakeholders so that they can say, yes, this is what I want, or no, this is not what I want, right? And then often with the wireframe in particular, the business is able to give you that yes, but response. Like, yes, like I want the login functionality, but the email address shouldn't be it. It should be a username, right? Or no, we don't want a password. We want to just have two-factor authentication that they have to get a code to their email every time, which is like how StreamYard does it, which to me is totally bizarre. But it would be like, that would be the kind of thing you would walk through in a use cases like this, or in a use case like this. And I've just noticed over the last few months in particular, we're seeing people even in agile environments talking more about them. As it's not uncommon in agile to get lost in the sea of user stories and have one story start to conflict with the other story. And so a use case just captures a more abstract level of thinking and allows you to think through that end-to-end workflow. And so it's critical whenever you're making software changes. I'm just going to go ahead for anyone who this is new to and drop a link in the chat to the our free use case template in case you want to check that out. Okay, use cases also help you generate a lot of high quality questions to be asking because missing pieces of requirements pop up pretty quickly with a good set of use cases, and they are everywhere. So here's just a list of possible use case names or areas like search for article, login, order a document, update customer information, generate report, right? Submit a quote, resolve a ticket. Okay. I always love to see use case names. We do this very often in our course programs. We have people share the names of what they're working on because it's always so fascinating to see what kind of functionality people are working on. It's really cool. And Lakey, one of the tools we use for wireframes is balsamic, and that is like balsamic vinegar, but with a Q on the end instead of a C. And they can also be used for software as a service products. So people were like, oh, but I'm not building things, right? I'm not building something. We're using a software that already exists. This is an example from one of our participants, Jamie Moore, who used a use case, her first ever use case when she was going through our program, and used it to figure out how to best leverage a functionality in Salesforce for her project to achieve a specific business goal. And there were a few different ways that you could configure the system or use the tools available in the system to do this. And she used a use case to walk through what she thought was the best approach. And she got, as you can see on the screen, absolutely phenomenal feedback from her stakeholders about this. So it is a very business stakeholder friendly tool. Okay, so we're back to the blueprint slide, and we're going to move on to data requirements here. Wow, time is flying so fast. Okay, this is great. So data requirements, so much of what we can do as a BA is about getting information that's currently managed in spreadsheets and forms and all kinds of like ways that are inaccessible into information systems where they can be managed and automated and controlled in better ways. And so also data migration and system integration projects are really common these days. So if you're moving to a new ERP system, that would be a system integration project. If you're moving to Salesforce, that's a system or a data migration project. So you would be moving data, whether that's from another CRM or from spreadsheets that their sales people are using into Salesforce, and you have that data piece to manage. You might also be integrating a system with other systems, and that might be through an API or some other technical way of doing things, but that's really a data integration or system integration. And so data is at the core of that. And so we really need to know how to understand the data model, whether or not we're actually creating the data model. So one of the core techniques that we teach is called a glossary. Super simple, but also like not everybody does them, right? It's so self-obvious a lot of times, but not everybody does them. And what happens when you don't do one, or when you don't use it, you might have it, but it hasn't been updated lately, or it's not a reference, is that you start to allow these differences in terminology to pop up in your documentation. And that causes ambiguity and confusion. And it's so powerful to have everybody in the room using a common language. So whether you actually document it in a glossary or use your glossary thinking. I've never used that term that way, but that's how I'm thinking, like a terminology focus to be like, hey, you're using the term customer and you're using the term customer. Are we actually, like, what do you mean by that? And making sure that people are on the same page about how they're using terminology. The next is an entity relationship diagram, and this shows visually how business concepts relate to one another. So for example, how does a customer relate to an order in your information system? Or a job posting relate to a hiring manager? Can a hiring manager have multiple job postings open at the same time? Can there be multiple job postings per role in the organization? Is there also a recruiter specifically assigned to that job posting? Right? Those are questions that you would start to model out in an ERD. Now, this can also look quite technical, but it's the same kind of model that's used to create a physical database model. But when we do it as business analysts, we create it from a higher level perspective. So we don't necessarily get into all the primary and foreign keys and all the depth of the data that might actually be included in your physical database model. We're looking for those key relationships. And here's just a quote from one of our participants, and she was working on an e-commerce integration project. And I love this note of like, I spoke the same language and I gained credibility with my developer. And that goes a long way. Okay, system context diagram is another one to be thinking about. This is how we visualize how information flows between systems, and we clarify system boundaries or scope for our system or our project. Right? So are we actually integrating this XYZ system? Is there a back and forth that we need to be aware of, or is that out of scope? It's a great tool to use for scope. Data dictionary, this is a list of data elements stored by an information system with key information describing each one. So for example, when you complete your order on Amazon, there's an order ID, there's your billing address, your shipping information, right? There's probably 30 or 40 pieces of information associated with that order or in relations to other tables. And so that would be modeled out in a data dictionary. And then the data map shows what happens when you are migrating or integrating systems of how one data dictionary relates to another. Okay. So that was a lot of information, and I could spend all day talking more about these things. I see a comment from, let's see, from Rachel. Glossaries are very useful, especially because at large companies, there's a lot of acronyms and they mean different things between different business units. So thank you for that. Great one. What tools do you use for the data side? I tend to keep things pretty low tech in this regard, and we have Excel spreadsheets as well as like Visio or a tool like Lucid for the more visual models like the system context diagram. But there are other tools that you can use as well. And Rachel says, yes, it looks intimidating, but it's not as bad as it looks. I would say at a minimum, you need to be able to understand what the model communicates. That is a great, great point. So, you know, even if you don't necessarily create it, can you read it? Can you validate that this represents what the business wants so that you are part of the decision-making about the data, or you're helping enable the business to be part of the decision-making about the data and not allowing maybe the database team to make assumptions about the data that aren't in the business's best interest. Okay. So I do have a few more tips to offer, and I wanted to share just a little bit about the upcoming Business Analyst Blueprint program and what's all included in that. And since we cover all of these skill sets, this just seems like the right time to do that. So the Business Analyst Blueprint program is about real-world practical support, real-world training with practical support, and it includes all kinds of training that is very based around real world guidance. So we have online videos, you can download those audios. We have very high quality transcripts that have visuals embedded in our PDF format. So you you could almost create a book out of the transcripts. They are really, really high quality transcripts. Along with templates. So you can, I shared our free use case template in the chat, but you can download templates for all of these different skill sets, or work samples, or swipe files. Like if it's an ERD, there's not a template for that, but we can give you a swipe file so you can start working with it that way. So there's resources that you can use to start applying it right away, as well as sometimes there's like checklists or meeting agendas. So if you're going into, hey, I need to discover this business process or the current details of the business process, right? We have a meeting agenda for that. Here's how that kind of meeting tends to flow and some best practices for running that kind of meeting. Or here's how to open this kind of meeting. Like here are the points that the talking points you want to go through when you're trying to discover business objectives with your team and they're resisting you because they think we should just get into what the software needs to do already. Here are some talking points you can use to guide that conversation, right? So all of that is included in the online materials. Then we have monthly office hours calls, and those are with me, and those are places you can bring your questions. Specifically, I'm really hoping we get a lot of questions about how to apply materials. So I'm trying to use a use case in this specific situation, and I'm getting stuck here, right? Or I'm getting pushback from my stakeholders on how to on the business objectives, like how can I handle this situation differently, right? So very practical challenges, as well as like I went through the course and I just didn't understand what the difference is between an alternate and exception flow, right? And we can talk about that as well. As well as bringing in work samples. So if there's something you want to just say, like, am I on the right track? How is this going? What adjustments would you make? That can also be addressed. And those two types of questions can also be addressed in our online forum. So it's not just in the monthly office hours calls, it's also in the online forum so that you have access to support in between those calls. So again, that includes work sample reviews as well as questions answered. So we do have a special, this is our like Cyber Monday, Black Friday, holiday, year-end deal, all of the above. Through the end of November, you can save $500. And the regular investment, December 1st, is $2,497 USD. So today through November 30th, you can join for $1,997 USD. If you have recently purchased the Business Analyst, the BA Essentials Masterclass, like in the last 6 months, or participated in the blueprint, you will get extra discounts. So those emails will be coming out to you tomorrow. And this is just a great opportunity to get on the ground floor, help shape the program, be part of the community. I really see this being an organization-wide community of practice based on these foundational skill sets and how we can apply them and bring these practices, these really practical practices back into our organizations. So one quick thing, and then I'm going to share the other tips that I have to share with you, is that we do have a bonus when you join by this coming Sunday, November 19th. I'm hosting an absolutely free coaching session on optimizing business analysis, how to uncover quick wins for project success. And so free by meaning it comes free as a bonus when you join the blueprint. So this will be about going through what are your quick wins? What are the things that you could be focusing on either through the end of the year or in Q1 to be optimizing your process, saving yourself time, saving your team time, making a really big impact right away. Even if you have a busy schedule and multiple commitments, it's really about where should you be focusing first. And this is going to help you really get a jump start on making the most in your investment in the program, but also like not taking on the big elephant if you can take on just the quick win that's going to make such a big difference. And so, you know, for me, one of these was putting an ERD in place in an organization, and another participant who did a workshop like this with us, it was about her meeting notes, right? So, or how she was doing her meeting agenda. And so all different ways of kind of finding those quick wins. Sometimes they can be really, really small. I do just want to emphasize that this does not include the ACBA. So previously, when we've run the Business Analyst Blueprint, the goal for the last few years has been to earn your applied certification in business analysis. That requires a much deeper level of participant commitment as well as instructor support. It's why we're able to offer this program at a much more accessible price point than we did previously. And we're reevaluating if and how to offer the ACBA in 2024. We don't have concrete plans yet, but if we did, there would be a path from this program to the next. Okay. So let me know if you have any questions about that, as well as anything else I've covered. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just kind of share. Let's see, I'm going to scan for any questions here. Bert says, I just learned Lucid in the last year, and it's a great tool for the BA, BSA. Awesome. How does the CDLC work in the business analyst role? So it really depends on what software development lifecycle is in place in your organization. So they always work in tandem. Like I'm sure, like they work like this, right? So part of when I shared that framework slide of the BA plan, part of figuring out your plan and what your BA deliverables are going to be is looking at what is the software development lifecycle in place in your organization, or the project management practice, or the implementation plan, whatever it's called, in your organization. What is that, and how does my work fit within it? So it's always got to be collaborative, right? You're not working in a vacuum. You're never working in a vacuum. So there's always overlap, and there's no generic answer to that. It's about figuring out what's in place in your organization and making sure your BA work supports that. Okay, great question. All right, so this was a lot, right? We covered a lot of information, a lot of techniques, a huge toolbox. I think there's 12 techniques in the blueprint, plus the end-to-end process. So like the last thing I want you to do is leave overwhelmed, and like I just left you 12 tasks to add to your to-do list, right? So my question for you, and this would be great to see in the chat, is what is the one technique that you can apply? Right? What's the biggest challenge you have in front of you right now? And what technique would support that? So I mentioned ERD being a big one for me. This was on a project we had an out of company like consulting software team and an internal set of developers, and their two databases needed to talk to each other in some way. And there were literal, very intense arguments. I'm sure people have been through these kinds of arguments, right? Where you have the developers yelling at each other and like about what's possible with the data and how this doesn't work like this, and they're both like just so clearly not talking to one another. And one of the consultants brought me aside. He's like, Laura, you really should create an entity relationship diagram. And I was like, what is that? And so I went, and I think I bought this book called UML Distilled. It's a great book. I taught myself how to create one. And then I think I showed it to the consultant, like, is this what you mean? Like this? He's like, yes. Okay. And so then I walked those developers through. I was like, I'm just trying to put together the big picture here. And let's walk through this bit by bit. We like literally, I had it kind of drawn out what I thought it was, and we drew it up on the whiteboard. They changed a bunch of it. But all of a sudden we went from almost fist fighting, not quite fist fighting, but it felt like that. It was really, really intense, right? To at least some conversation and some like, I don't think that's going to work. Well, wait, this could work, right? And so there was this understanding of how the data could flow and how we could make these two different data models work together. And so that was me using a technique that we've just talked about to really solve a really elevated problem. So for you, what's the one technique that's going to make a difference that might help you and your team pass a situation? It doesn't have to be that intense, right? But that's what I would encourage you to start with. Focus on that one thing. And then the second tip is to get out of your silo. So we talked about getting stuck in that proven role. And this is when somebody finds themselves really getting stuck in a role, even pigeonholed, and you're on the same type of project or in the same part of their organization, and it's just too long, right? And it starts to feel like you can't break out. And it's absolutely essential that you choose to break out and move outside your comfort zone. So for me, this happened when I moved to that second BA role, and I talked about how much stronger my BA skills, but it doesn't have to be like moving across the country and a new company. It can be working in a new department. It can be tackling a different type of project in your organization, a new tech stack, right? It could even be a side project, maybe that you volunteer at a local IABA chapter or another organization, right? Just something that gets you outside of the way things are on your current situation, because it will make your BA skills stronger, and it will give you the confidence that you can start to work in multiple different industries if you should choose to do so. And often lack of confidence is what typically holds people back here. And so having a support network can really help. And so the final thing I want to share with you when it comes to being a high performing BA is to find your your community, build your community. When I was in my first BA role, we had 4 people on our team. Again, we were systems analysts, and I started a peer review session. We met every other week and we reviewed each other's use cases. And I learned by the feedback that people gave me, for sure. I needed it. I learned even more by the feedback I gave others. And I started to like see what I knew by, oh, wait, I can review this other person's use case and find like a question that they're not thinking about because they're so close to it. And I was the newest person on that team. I was in my mid-20s working with people in their 30s, maybe even their 50s, right? And so there was no reason that I should have been the person starting this meeting. But having that network was so important to me that I just said, let's do this. And people came along. So whatever you do, find your people. Find the people in your organization that you can collaborate with. Find the people in your local area. Find your people across the globe. Because I will also say, as much as I learned from that peer group, we were also laboring under this false and limiting belief that we were in some sort of made up role that was just specific to our company, right? And this was either right as or before IIBA was even being founded. So like there wasn't as much about the profession, but we had no idea. One of the senior person on our team attended a class on use cases and she came back and she was like, guess what? Other people do this too, right? And we're like, really? Like, what is that like? So we had, even though we were working together and collaborating together, we had no idea what was happening at other organizations, and why I think it's so important that your community also expands beyond your company and your industry. That gives you that exposure. So if you're in that proven role and you're like, gosh, I'd really like to try something new, but I'm a little bit fearful about that. Maybe just looking at deliverables from other people and other organizations can be a great place to start. And that's part of what we're building in this next version of the Business Analyst Blueprint, is the opportunity to share your work and also see the work of other people. So I'm really excited about that. Okay. I am fine staying on a bit for questions. I realize that we are very close to the top of the hour. But I'm definitely here for questions. I had planned to be able to answer some questions today. So I'm going to kind of go back a little bit and start to work through these. And if you have a question that you put in like before this one question from Anan, please put it in again so that we can get to it here. So how is the ACBA different from the CBAP, which is most beneficial? So actually, we're not offering the ACBA right now in the Business Analyst Blueprint program, but I will say it's an applied certification, right? So it's about completing the work on the job and submitting that in for instructor review. And I think there's not like an either or, both can be beneficial in different situations. So it's really about what you're looking for. I will say in the current version of the blueprint that we're sharing today, there is also my intention is to bring like the essence of that instructor feedback into the community and into the program, so that you get the feedback on just the piece that you need, like in your current situation, that's going to help move you forward, versus having to do every piece of work from a module in order to like pass a specific module and earn your certification. So the feedback component is still absolutely key to what we're offering. Let's see. How do we break down high-level requirements in a transformation project? And what's the best approach to plan breaking down high-level project requirements? So this is where in a program I'd probably ask a little bit more questions, like what kind of transformation project, right? What's the end goal? Like what's the business objective? Right? That's always the place that I would start. What is that business objective? What are we trying to accomplish? And you might start with either a high-level process flow of the key stages. You might start with a system context diagram, right, of what are the key systems and how do they work together. Those two models tend to give a lot of awareness when you complete them at a very high level. And then what are the key feature sets that we need in order to enable the transformation? And then you just start layering down. So that might be like a functional decomposition diagram of some sort. Okay. Aditya says, how do I identify a process and activity? So the key question about a process is always, when does it start and when does it end? right? So if you're talking to somebody about their order management, great. When does an order start? Is it when the customer calls? Is it when somebody sits down to go put an order in the system? Like what starts that process? And when is it complete? And you might start by getting this like huge, like breaking down process, right? And that's when you're, okay, what are the key stages in that? And then maybe each of those pieces become a process in and of themselves, or maybe they're actually activities. So an activity would roll up and be part of that and then process. But just getting to that starting and ending point is often a great place to start. I love this. Wireframing. Yes, it's the best. Okay. What is the difference between a user flow and a process diagram? So I'm going to assume this is use case. So usually a use case is a step-by-step process of how the user interacts with a system. And so it's going to be the user takes this action, the system takes this action. And really the meat of the use case is getting to those software requirements or the system requirements. What are those software responses? A process flow diagram is going to be more focused on those user steps and how those achieve a business outcome. So often a use case might support a part of the business process, but the user or the business person might also go check another system. That could be another use case, or receives a piece of paper, right? Not a use case at all, just they receive a piece of paper. So the business process looks at the whole thing from the business user perspective. And that software piece is just how do they interact with the system. And it's usually there might be several use cases to support a business process, depending on kind of the granularity of your process. Okay, Carrie, good to see you, Carrie. I need to work on being more intentional about my approach to my BA work and draft a BA plan as early as I can. PMO leadership wants a lot of visibility into what I'm doing. All right, well, that's a great next step. Thank you for sharing that. All right, let's see. Rachel, agree. I recently used this to have a better view of the environment and how the various systems interact. So I'm assuming that that's talking about a system context diagram. Okay. I want to see this comment. So Bert says, I used to think that peer reviews were a waste of time until I didn't have them anymore. I'm glad Laura brought this up because I need to start doing this again because they are super helpful. Awesome. Great next step, Bert. Okay. What technique would you use to identify gaps in existing systems and how they compare to business requirements? So I would start with understanding the business process, the current state, as well as the desired future state of that business process. And then I would look at, for the future state, what are the software requirements that we need? So I would start to look at those use cases. What are the software requirements that are in place? And what do we need? And then the gap is, where are we not supporting that future state business process and using a use case for that? And sometimes, it's not like you need a whole new use case. So you might just need an additional step in a use case or an additional kind of nuance of functionality. But the use case, you can color code like what's new to be really clear. And then if you're in an agile environment, that would become your user story. Okay, how would you focus as a BA, or how would you as a BA focus on real problems and solutions when your PM and management are more interested in meeting deadlines? Severe lack of business analysis within an organization. Great question. This is a great question. So, yes. So again, like we talked about before, like you always get to choose, right? Like you have a job, you have expectations for that job, and you might not feel like this is the fullest use of your capabilities. But you always get to choose. Is this the battle that I am here to fight right now? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no, right? So first of all, just you get to choose whether or not this is something that you're going to take on. And then if the answer to that is yes, like I want to take this on, or it's my time to take it on, or it's the right context to take it on, what is the first thing that you can do? This is part of what we're going to cover in this workshop on Monday. Is like, what is the quickest win, the quickest, easiest thing that you can do that's going to have the most possible impact in your organization? And so it's probably not going to be doing like all the business objectives, but it might be like, as we're exploring this solution, I'm going to take some time and understand the business process. right? And make sure I understand the context for how this solution fits into our business process. Or I'm going to ask, like, why is that important? And just start to spend a few minutes having that kind of discussion so that I'm starting to bring more visibility to it. So I think you inch your way in and start to bring it in. And you also, as you're doing that, you make sure when you do come to a great outcome or save time or save money, like celebrate the heck out of that and share that so that people are starting to learn and experience the value of what you can bring. Okay, great question. Stelios, do you use any tool for user requirements in user story format like Azure, DevOps, or Jira or something else? Yeah, so BAs use a lot of these tools. And so you will often use, if you are in an agile team, you will use the tool that the team uses to manage their software development lifecycle. And so you might create your use cases in Word or in Confluence, more of a wiki-based tool, because those don't necessarily fit in with like a Jira, but then you're going to break them up into user stories. So we do also cover user stories and product backlog in the blueprint. You're going to break those up into user stories, and those would go into Jira. Your product backlog would go into Jira so you can prioritize things. So yes, you want to get your user stories into a format that is shared with the development team. It's one of the great, wonderful things about Agile is like the requirements are embedded right with the implementation. So it's way harder to miss requirements. Okay. Akash asks, how would you as a BA focus on the real problems and solutions when your project manager, your PM and management are, oh wait, we talked about that one. Okay, thank you for getting it in twice. Kania, when can the blueprint course be accessed? It's actually available right now. I forgot to put the link in the chat. Let me do that real quick. Do I have the link? I think that's when I started to feel like we were going to run out of time. And so all right, I put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to check it out. And it's available now. It is you invest in 6 months of access to the content, to the monthly office calls, to the online forums. There will be an option to extend your access for a much more affordable, like a discounted investment level once you're done with the 6 months. And the $500 discount is available through November 30th. And then the bonus workshop I'm running is this coming Monday, November 20th. So when you join by the 19th, or the morning of the 20th, but mostly, just the 19th. So there's no issues. You will get invited to that workshop as well. All right. That is what I'm seeing in the chat. Thank you all so much for being here. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun as well. I hope you learned something and you have a best practice. Remember, a best practice, like a real practice that you can take to do better in the real world, make your projects more successful. And I just saw one question come in, so I'm going to go ahead and answer that, and then we'll close things up. So Adidia says, is the use case applicable specifically to waterfall model? Oh, I love this question. I'm so glad this came in. Or is it applicable in agile model in addition to user stories? Yes, and both. Like, I think you can use cases. I mean, those are the two main scenarios, right? But actually use cases came out of rational unified process. I'm not big on the theory, but I know they came out of rational unified process, which was really an iterative software development lifecycle that predated Agile. And so it was very iterative. And this is how I learned to do them. We did iterations of use case and broke them up into pieces and parts and kind of broke the system down in this way. And so it is relevant for both approaches. And in Agile, your user stories will often fall out of your use cases. In more of a waterfall approach, you might do all of your use cases sort of upfront and then turn those over. Though even so, I like to do some sort of iterative process with the development team, and there's a lot of collaboration there. So it's not just me sitting in a corner writing a bunch of use cases. It's intended to be a collaborative analytical tool. Okay. Giovanna asks, in your opinion, is a CBAP certification worth getting for someone looking to become a BA from a different career background? It certainly can be. So you need to have 5 years of experience as a BA to apply for your CBAP. So what will often, and that might be like, well, how would I become a BA? But often you have been doing business analysis in other roles that you can relate to the business analysis body of knowledge. So in that case, you could use that experience to apply for your CBAP. So often doing a program like what we offer with the Business Analyst Blueprint might be a good first step, because we're going to give you a very accessible introduction. And not that it's like junior level, because we've had very senior people go through the program, but like it's going to be a more practical, application oriented, and it gives you the terminology so that when you start to apply, go through the BABOK and prepare for the CBAP, it will just be easier. It'll be more sticky because you'll have been through it and kind of have a sense of the business analysis role. But it can be a great option. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here once again. And I appreciate your time and your energy and your interaction in the chat. It makes it so much more fun for me when we have some great questions to answer and I get to see how what I'm sharing is resonating with you. So thank you for being here. If you're watching the replay, let me know how this landed with you. And if you have any follow-up questions, I would love to see all of you inside our next version of the Business Analyst Blueprint. And you have some time. You have till the end of November to get the discount, and through Sunday if you want to join us for that bonus webinar on Monday. So I will see you next time. We've got some fun stuff lined up for December and January. I've already got 2 LinkedIn Lives lined up as well. So I'm really excited about what we have in store for you going forward. And of course, to see you in this next version of the program. Have a great one. Great rest of your week. Thank you so much for being here.